There probably couldn't be a better time for the resurgence of a heritage running brand with striking Italian design. But no matter how good a shoe looks, it's gotta have it where it counts. Can this latest racing shoe from a brand steeped in Italian racing history bring Diadora back into the running conversation? It's time to lace up the Gara Carbon 3 and take it for a ride. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys about the Diadora Gara Carbon 3. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that was sent to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Gara Carbon 3, and let's start with the specs. This is a 39mm stack height shoe with a 5mm drop, giving us 34mm of stack height in the forefoot. And in this shoe, we've got two components. One is a carbon fiber plate that starts up high in the heel and scoops down relatively low. You can see it through this little window at the bottom of the shoe. And the other component, the main component in this shoe, is Diadora's Anima PBX. That's their PIBA midsole compound. It's a racing caliber foam. The insole is made out of EVA and it's glued down so it's not removable. And on the outsole, we have a TPU that gives a pretty large amount of surface area coverage, and it has some holes cut into the TPU to provide some extra bite. But because it is a racing shoe, the material isn't very thick, so it's going to keep the weight down. On the upper, they're using a matrix upper with carbon yarns to provide extra structural support, mostly around the midfoot. There is a very thin tongue that is light and airy, and then there is a moderate amount of padding for a racing shoe all throughout the heel collar and in through the heel cup. There is a little bit of structure in that heel cup as well, so more than I typically see in a lot of race product, but not something that's going to be crazy obstructive. Now, when it comes to fit, I think people are going to need to size up on this one. I think that the last that Diadora is using is not quite right, at least for maybe American feet. I always feel like there's not enough room for that pinky toe. It's either cutting over in the shoe a little bit too quickly, and or it's a little too shallow on that far end of the foot. So I think for most people watching this video, you're going to want to size up. The length of the shoe is fine, and so that's why I think that maybe there's some tweaks that could happen with the last that they're using. And it's also been a consistent thing that I found with a lot of Diadora shoes that I've been testing lately. So hopefully they can make that tweak, but in the interim, I'm going to recommend that you guys size up. Overall, they've managed to keep the weight on this shoe in a competitive range. I always like to see for a race product in 2026 to be under 200 grams, and this one comes just below that at 196 grams or 6.9 ounces. Now that we talked about what this shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. The Diadora Gara Carbon 3 is a very similar experience to the last version, just tightened up a little bit. I'm not sure if they've tweaked the formulation of the PIBA that's going into the Anima PBX, or maybe they've tweaked the position of the carbon fiber plate, but getting a little bit more density as I'm pushing off from the forefoot this time around. However, softness is still the predominant feeling that I'm getting from this shoe, just like in the previous version. Now, it's not intensely soft like the Metaspeed Ray, and it's not incredibly mushy like the Endorphin Elite 3. And those two shoes, I'd say, are kind of on the farthest edge of their respective spectra when it comes to softness and mushiness when it comes to racing shoes. But this shoe continues to remind me of older New Balance racing shoes like the RC Elite 2 and the SC Elite 3, where the shoes were very cushioned and absorbing impact from the road and then kind of rolling you forward gently with each foot strike rather than kind of like popping you off and exploding into the next foot strike, which is the experience that I feel with a lot more aggressive racing shoes. Now, I think in terms of the changes, I do think that the heel lifts up a little bit easier than it did in last year's Gara Carbon 2. I think they've trimmed around some of the unnecessary foam that was in the back. And they also think that they've tweaked the rocker position just a little bit in this shoe to make it easier to get up on the toes. They've also changed this side profile where there's now a notch in the side of the shoe, but also there's extra width coming off behind the pads of the feet, which tells me that this is a shoe that's intended more for midfoot strikers because they put a little bit of extra landing pad for you back here. So you land flat on the shoe and then roll forward and then push off into the next foot strike. But I do think that I want a little bit more pop still from the forefoot as I'm pushing off. However, I think with the way that they've set this shoe up, I think that it's going to be a nice improvement for people who are midfoot strikers or are otherwise runners who are looking for a marathon shoe that is soft but not as aggressive as some of the other marathon shoes are on the market. Now let's wrap up this video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some alternatives. The Diadora Gara Carbon 3 is a racing shoe for runners looking for a soft but not mushy marathon experience. The shoe retails now for 1 tariff more than it was last year, bringing the total price to $320 retail. And I think that's just way too much for what you're getting in this shoe. Normally, I would suggest for people to look back at the prior version, especially where in this case, the prior version is pretty similar, but you'd only be saving $10 by going to last year's Gara Carbon 2, because that shoe is still retailing for $310. But now let's take a look around the market to see where the Gara Carbon 3 stacks up to similarly situated shoes. And I think the first shoe that we need to talk about is from New Balance. I've already mentioned the shoes that I think that the Gara Carbon 3 reminds me the most of, but the one that you can currently buy from New Balance is the SC Elite version 5. Now, I think that the runner who is looking at one of these shoes should probably look at the other, but I do think that there are some differences. While they both have PIBA and they both have pretty similar paper specs, I think the experience on the SC Elite version 5 is very different. The SC Elite has typically been a very kind of like middle of the road, not too soft, not too firm, not too aggressive, not too chill type of racing shoe. But in version 5, they finally made it a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more speedy, which is something that I kind of wanted. I kind of felt like New Balance wasn't making a decision with their SC Elite previously, and now they finally have. And I think now what we have is a midfoot striker shoe for landing in the middle of the shoe and then rolling and pushing off from the forefoot there. And we have a PIBA material, which is really nice. It's a little bit more dense than you normally associate with PIBA, but it really gives a lot back the faster that you're trying to go in this shoe. And overall, what they've managed to do here is to create a marathon racing experience that reminds me of running in race flats while still giving me all the benefits of modern technology. If the prior versions of the SC Elite were maybe a little bit too relaxed for you, I think the SC Elite version 5 is the update that you're looking for. And between the Gara Carbon 3 and the SC Elite version 5, I would prefer the SC Elite version 5, especially because you're going to be saving a lot of money to get to that shoe, as it retails now for $265. Now, I think the other shoe that you should be thinking about if you're looking at the Gara Carbon 3 comes from Ning, and this is the Feidian 6 Elite. Now, this is a shoe that I think is actually intended for forefoot strikers, but it has a lot of features that I think that midfoot strikers are going to also enjoy. And if you're kind of midfoot, kind of forefoot, I think that this shoe is going to work out really well for you. Now, the Feidian 6 Elite gives me that extra sense of pop that I'm looking for. It also feels like a taller shoe, but it's also nice and comfy when you're landing in the midfoot or even further back towards the heel in the shoe, because that lower layer of foam that's in the Feidian 6 Elite is nicely soft. So I think that there is a similarity in the softness between these two shoes that I enjoy, but the Feidian 6 Elite has a little bit of extra pop that I really am enjoying. Now, the weights between these two shoes are pretty similar. There is a 1/10 of an ounce advantage by going with the Gara Carbon 3, but I think that you are making up for it in the performance and that extra sense of fun pop that you're getting with the Feidian 6 Elite. When it comes to the pricing on this shoe though, that's where things kind of get a little bit kind of weird for at least those of us in the United States. I took a bunch of screenshots by looking up the Feidian 6 Elite on a web search, trying to figure out how much does this shoe retail for, and I got like 5 or 6 different prices for the same shoe. So like buying this shoe is a little bit of a close your eyes and hope for the best experience, which I don't love, but the shoe is technically available for sale in the United States for those of you who are interested in that shoe. And I think generally speaking, you should be able to get this shoe for much cheaper than the 310 of the Diadora Gara Carbon 3. So those are my thoughts on Diadora's latest race offering. I appreciate that it's an improvement over last year, but I was really hoping for a bolder statement from the brand. I hope they're going to be able to move quickly enough to meet this moment in running where both performance and style are so important. If you have any questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today, feel free to leave them in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?